The zombie movie has a long and storied history. It's had many ups and downs, becoming either a mainstream wave and then having the time to have died down again by 2025. It's become a genre in and of itself, and it's one that I think many people, including myself, are fascinated by. Along with the wave of zombie revivals sparked in the early 2000s by things like Resident Evil or House of the Dead, was 28 Days Later. While technically not a zombie film itself, the post-apocalyptic setting due to a highly contagious virus is clearly evoking the imagery and concept of the rotting undead, without them rotting or being undead. Directed by Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland, it was inspired by the ever-classic Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead series, the progenitor of zombie media. However, the director himself might not be very pleased with this intro centering on zombies, as he does not consider this a zombie movie. So in this review, I'll just keep things to the movie itself instead of comparing it to the enormous body of work that surrounds the concept of zombies. I wanted to talk about this movie as someone who had never seen it until right now, exploring why I found it so effective and documenting my experiences with the series as I move through each entry and new ones come out. I'll be vaguely touching on overall plot points throughout the film, so not too many things that are super direct, but I would say it is a spoiler if you have not seen the movie. So, if you somehow haven't, go watch 28 Days Later. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. The film follows the classic setup of a man waking up from a coma and finding empty streets and total isolation. Jim becomes our protagonist as he meets with a few other survivors, comes to terms with the weight of the situation, and pushes forward to survival. The theme of isolation is so well encapsulated by the camera work and cinematography. The crew apparently rushed to film these well-known London streets either early in the morning or closing them off when they could to create this sense of emptiness. Distant, wide shots give so much space to place you in Jim's shoes. It's almost suffocatingly quiet and empty. The music also gets to take its stand in the film's opening, which was absolutely breathtaking. Composed by John Murphy, I could not get enough of how well the music is able to quietly assist the loneliness. It then warms up as you start to realize the terror of the situation until it suddenly crescendos with this beautifully shot scene in a church where the horror of something even worse than loneliness presents itself to the main character, the music ramping up and really assisting the emotions of each and every scene. I found the music all the way through the movie to be so perfectly fitting and really transforms a great movie into a seminal one. The movie's dripping with style, and I think that's what makes something like this so memorable. I found the story fairly effective, and I'll get into it more later, but I think what makes it stand out and really affect me is just how well it's shot. Every few minutes, I kept being in awe by how much I loved the cinematography. I think a big part of why it works also comes down to the digital cameras used. The early 2000s was the dawn of digital filming, which means that the quality is capped at a quite low resolution. They filmed with smaller camcorders, which I think offered a lot of freedom in how they were able to shoot certain things and move the camera around. And to some extent, the low-resolution camcorders really place the movie in a specific time, almost giving it like a found footage quality. I don't think that was intended, but it's a little interesting effect of time passing since the release of it. Some of the cuts and editing in the movie can be a little bit obnoxious, but I don't ever feel it's done amateurly. Just sometimes quick cuts and stuff can feel a little off. The story can be kind of split into two main sections. The general apocalypse trek, making their way to the faint glimmer of hope that comes from an old radio recording of some sort of army, and the second part, which is almost entirely centered on the small base with a few men. Each offers their own experience, themes, and narrative direction, though I have to say, in general, I prefer the first bit, which luckily makes up the majority of the movie. The second part has some confusingly orchestrated chaos, which imbues intensity and excitement, but also some questions. I had a lot of weird logistical issues, like, wait, how did he get there? Seriously, no one heard that? Was that part of the plan? How did that work? Nothing big enough to rob the scenes of their intense emotions, but they did ever so slightly pull me away from believing everything I was seeing, which is a shame. I think the most interesting thing about the movie is the way that it explores familiar tropes and themes to these sorts of films, but manages to make them feel as if it's original and unique. Particularly the isolation, as I mentioned earlier, the difference between surviving and living, and finally that humans can be the real monsters. Each of these ideas, arguably, has been done to death. But not as much before its release in 2002, but even then there are examples to pull from. Yet even today, in 2025, after being barraged by media playing on these tropes, it still feels fresh and exciting. This is something I can't easily explain, to be honest. It just comes down to quality execution and your own personal experience. So there's a chance that aspect might not work as well for everybody else. But I really found it to be a breath of fresh air, despite basically being the blueprint for so much that came after it. However, like with any other film, there are some problems with it, of course. I found some of the sound mixing to be a bit of a mess. Super quiet dialogue is often contrasted with obscenely loud thriller scenes, which left me playing with my remote as much as I was engaged with the movie. Of course, this is usually done to make it feel so much more intense, but a lot of the time I just get annoyed and lower the volume. Stuff like that can be really frustrating, since it's just one of those very simple things, though it can also come down to personal audio setups and what version of the movie you have. Everything should have been working fine, but you never know. It's worth just bringing up regardless. There's also some shockingly prevalent product placement for Pepsi. So many scenes of the movie prominently show Pepsi, and even mention Pepsi. Like a lot of other things, I would not say it detracts from the good qualities of the movie, but it is quite distracting and almost comical. When I'm getting immersed in the feelings of the protagonist, feeling the eerie quiet of the seemingly abandoned world, it pulls me out a little bit when he rocks up to a Pepsi vending machine, and then grabs a can of Pepsi and starts drinking it. Then grabs a plastic bag to fill it with Pepsi, and it doesn't end there, as more scenes throughout the movie contain it. It's just silly. However, as you can tell, I don't really have any other massive problems with the substance of the film. If these are my biggest issues, I consider that to be quite the compliment to the filmmaking. 28 Days Later is a classic for a reason. I really enjoyed jumping back to experience it. It can sometimes feel redundant discussing a film that already has a pretty settled critical consensus, especially when I completely agree with it, but I find it so fun to chronicle my experience, and I think I represent a lot of younger adults, or maybe even some teenagers, who are getting into film. People have heard all about the classics, new and old, and just get overwhelmed by the abundance and keep to what they know. So regardless, I recommend 28 Days Later. Whether it's a film you grew up watching as a horror from your youth, or one you've heard of because of the new movie but don't really know much about it, I think it appeals to everyone. Speaking of that new film, since the new trilogy brings attention back to the series, I'm gonna make my way through each entry and make a review of them all. So next up will be 28 Weeks Later, and if you're interested in hearing what I have to say, then please do subscribe to stay aware of when that comes out. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later.